morning to the Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, online viewers, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM and respective radio stations island-wide. I'm Rolika Roach and welcome to the Live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, October 2nd, 2019. At this time, I invite the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Wycliffe Smith, to address you. Minister Smith.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roach. Greetings to all gathered here this morning, colleague ministers, the Department of Communications, Honorable Prime Minister, members of the press, as well as those who are listening and viewing via radio, television, or social media. Good morning. The Student Support Services Division will be hosting a workshop on October 3rd, 2019, entitled My PBL, PKL, and TKL Education and Beyond. And this will be held at the University of St. Martin from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. on October 3rd. The aim is to help students in these technical areas to explore and research continued education options at home and abroad. Students are encouraged to be on time and to register for the workshop since space is limited. If parents or students have any questions on these workshops, they can contact the Student Support Services Division at telephone 543-1235 for more information. The Student Support Services Division office is located in the Amigo building across from the police station and next to the Windward Islands Bank. Some information on the ISTEP conference. The Division for Educational Innovation will be hosting the ISTEP Conference 2019 Techsperience from October 2nd to October 4th, 2019. There they will launch the ISTEP app with a demo at the Emilio Wilson Museum. This is another advancement in the technology being made available to our teachers and to our students as we move forward and move towards more blending learning approaches. This year, not only will the public school teachers be able to benefit from the ISTEP conference, but also subsidized schools received a couple of slots per school to attend. The ISTEP team plans to continue growing the Techsperience Conference, where it will be able to accommodate all teachers in the future. The Tallahassee Sister City Partnership. Senior Study Financing Officer Calvin Mardenborough and his colleague Jessica Rogers recently returned from their working visit to Tallahassee, Florida. Mr. Mardenborough has been a constant visitor to Tallahassee since 2001, and he has built a great network of persons of influence in that closely knit community with similar characteristics as St. Martin. These characteristics have proven to be the perfect fit for a sister city agreement that has produced so much positive results through the years. While in Tallahassee, Mardenborough and his colleague Rogers were able to visit Florida A&M University, Tallahassee Community College, Florida State University, and the Lively Technical College. Discussions were held with these institutions. Topics discussed included new programs being offered, admissions requirements, our students' performance, and what we can do collectively to ensure that our students continue to make St. Martin proud, as so many have done in the past. All schools had the usual high praises for our study financing recipients. The anniversary event on Wednesday afternoon was well attended and included longtime friends of St. Martin instrumental in setting up the Sister City Agreement and lending their full support throughout the years. Mardenborough and Rogers also represented the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport at that 20th anniversary of the Twin City partnership between St. Martin and Tallahassee. They presented a plaque of appreciation from the ministry to Mayor John Daly, who also read a proclamation commemorating the occasion. The study financing representatives also visited Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, with whom the ministry has an MOU. Quite recently, the Council of Ministers also approved for my person as Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport to sign an MOU with a branch of Nova Southeastern University located in Puerto Rico. This branch is the College of Computing and Engineering. This means that our students who want to pursue computing and engineering can stay right here in the region and obtain their master's degree in engineering. All in all, Mr. Mardenborough and Ms. Rogers have been able to acquire a lot of information and experience on their trip, which will surely be useful in the coming study financing application period. The Brown Pelican Awards will be coming up shortly. Stay tuned to announcements from the Department of Sports for details that will be coming out shortly. And the St. Martin Day celebrations, also within just a few weeks, the Department of Culture is currently very busy with the plans and preparations for the 60th celebration of St. Martin Day. I encourage all schools, community cultural groups, creative arts persons, every St. Martiner and lover of St. Martin, both on the north and on the south sides, to celebrate with us. There will be many activities planned on the national level, so check the dates and venues and be there with your family and with your friends. And in closing, I wish to extend an early Happy Teachers' Day greeting to all our educators from preschool to tertiary level, both active and retired. Teachers, you are the cornerstone of the country's development. You shape the minds of our young and help them to develop into leaders of tomorrow. Officially, Saturday, October 5th, is the internationally recognized date, but we need not wait until then. By now, all school boards, that is public, subsidized, and private schools, should have received distributed the gift certificate coupons to the staff on behalf of the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sport. Parents, students, and past students, show your appreciation for your teachers this week in word or deed or through a gift. They deserve it. Thank you very much for watching and for listening, and I'll be available for any questions. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you, Minister Smith, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Prime Minister, Minister of General Affairs, and Acting Minister of Public Health, Social Development, and Labor, the Honorable Leona Romeo Marlin.
Thank you, Relika. Good morning to all my colleagues, members of the press. Good morning, St. Martin. This morning, I would like to remind the public that the 11th edition of the Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management, co-hosted by the Government of St. Martin in collaboration with the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, or CDEMA, will take place on December 2nd to the 6th. The theme of the conference is The Road to Resilient Checkpoint 2019, safeguarding our communities, livelihoods, and economies. Following the successful launch of the conference on August 22nd, I have the pleasure of announcing to our local stakeholders and partners in resilience that registration is officially opened online. To register, please visit cedema.org/CDM11 or email the local planning committee at cdm11@stmartingov.org. That is cdm11 at stmartingov.org. The objective of the conference is to promote the inclusion of cross-sectorial representation from government, private sector, and NGOs, locally and regionally, as it relates to the advancement of comprehensive disaster management. As you are aware, on October 1st, all the members of the Central Voting Bureau made their positions available. As a result, the Council of Ministers took the decision to postpone postulation day that was scheduled for today, October 2nd, 2019. It is important to note that the decision on the dismissal of Parliament by the Council of Ministers will remain in place while the dates for postulation day, election day, and the new sitting of Parliament will be amended following for the proper execution of the election. The execution of a fair, legal, and proper election has always been the objective of the Council of Ministers. The issue in this matter is the interpretation and application of Article 59. In last week's press briefing, I gave the reason why the Council of Ministers had decided to invoke Article 59, and in this press briefing, I want to further clarify matters with facts. I hope this will provide a better framework for people to understand the law and context and to conclude for themselves that the decision was not taken lightly, as some suggest, and certainly not prematurely. The decision was taken after ample consideration. I will do as much as possible without violating the confidentiality of discussions with the governor, but will let the facts speak for themselves. Facts to date. On September 23rd, the Council of Ministers submitted a Lands Besleuret to the governor invoking Article 59. This Lands Besleuret, number one, was carefully prepared and motivated after due consultation with the Electoral Council and the Voting Bureau to determine the dates. The governor takes Lands Besleuret number one into consideration and advises the Council of Ministers. On the same day, September 23rd, taken into account the counsel of the governor, a new Lands Besleuret number two is submitted to the governor. This is the Lands Besleuret that the governor refers to in his press release. Lands Besleuret number two is forwarded to the Central Voting Bureau on September 25th. By letter, the same day the Voting Bureau raises objections against the dates in Lands Besleuret number two, both on legal, so the violation of the Kiesverordening or the electoral ordinance of Article 23 of the Constitution and international rights, and logistical organizational grounds. On September 25th, the Council of Ministers also receives a letter of a new political party, Party for Progress, which, due to the deadline set in Lands Besleuret number two, will not be able to postulate and claims violation of the European Convention of Human Rights. The Council of Ministers took these letters serious and considers how a compromise can be reached to ensure the requirements of the Constitution can be met in such a way that the violation with the treaties can be avoided. Various alternatives have been considered, consultation with the governor and other stakeholders. A solution was sought. We thought of making an exception as we have done earlier occasions whereby Lands Besleuret number two changed to either to amend the Lands Besleuret number two in accordance with the dates set out in Lands Besleuret number one, as these were based on consultation with the Central Voting Bureau, thus postponing the current deadlines, or amend Lands Besleuret number two, which to respect the 90-day term stated in Article 59, but to set deadlines for postulation which respects the rights to choose and to be chosen. In both cases, it should be clearly acknowledged that this is an exception pending urgent reparation needed to the laws regulating the electoral process. Maintaining the checks and balances which safeguard the trias politica, but ensuring that the conditions and deadlines required by the electoral laws are clear, reasonable, and feasible, respecting the rights to choose and to be chosen. This resulted in the drafting of a new Landsbesluit number 3, which amends the dates to Landsbesluit number 2. This morning, I am happy to inform that the Electoral Council and the Central Voting Bureau met with the government's legal team, and a new dates will be set and sent to the governor for signature. Once received, the public will be duly informed of the new dates. I am well aware of the sentiments of the community. As you may have noticed over the years, this is the time when many of our seasoned politicians, movers, and shakers flourish. In a state of confusion, these persons in our community seize the moment to add to the melee and disorder. There is a saying or strategy that many of these persons operate by, which is order through chaos. Therefore, to those of you in the community who are confused, disgruntled, and fed up with the way things are going in this country, I only ask that you follow the legal process. Yes, we are at an impasse, as there is a lack of alignment between the electoral law and the Constitution. But hopefully, in due time, this will be finally fixed. I thank you, and I await your questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your opening remarks. The Minister of Finance, the Honorable Perry Hearlings, is present, however, will not be making any opening statements, but is available for any questions the media may have. We now move on to the question and answer session. Lyndon Brown of BCN TV, you have the floor.
Good morning to the people of St. Martin and to the ministers that are here today. Question to Minister Smith. Minister Smith, you had the school safety plan already passed, but a couple of days ago, the public prosecutor formulated a group to help and oversee the different schools to combat school fighting. Did you have any communication with the prosecutor on that matter, seeing that you have the school safety plan?
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for your question. The school safety plan that I have been referring to, that's a school safety plan that has to do with emergencies, natural disasters, so hurricanes, and etc. So that plan is in place so that schools know, children know what to do, how to prepare for a natural disaster. What you're referring to, we did have, as Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, a meeting with the prosecutor, with the community police, and we discussed the matter of aggression and violence and fights at schools. What they're doing now is all the instances of justice, they're coming together. And if I notice also in the press release that they submitted that they will be discussing with other stakeholders. So there will be, I'm sure, that they will be having with the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. And as I said before, we have had discussions with the prosecutor and with the community police about these matters.
Thank you, Minister Smith. Dimitri Wheatfield of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Good morning to the Council of Ministers and good morning to St. Martin. My question is to the Prime Minister. Regarding elections, what would be tentatively the dates for the next election? Will it be early this year, late this year, rather, or early next year?
Thank you for that question. I will wait until the governor signs, and then we will announce those dates.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Wendell Moore of Seymour Journal, you have the floor.
A follow-up to that same question, Prime Minister. You said that there is a third Landsbesluit that was made up. Is it already submitted? And if so, then you should be able to tell us exactly when the election is scheduled, as well as postulation.
Thank you, Mr. Wendell Moore. Indeed, a third land split was made up this morning while we had a discussion with the Electoral Council and the main voting bureau. Once the Council of Ministers meet and we make our decision from there, then it will be sent to the governor for signature. So before that and before the signature of the governor, I prefer not to indicate when it will be to cause any further confusion in the community. So once the governor signed, then it's signed, sealed, and will be delivered.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We now move on to the second round of questions. Lyndon Brown, you have the floor.
Question to Minister of Finance. Minister of Finance, the government is in crisis, meaning when something in crisis, it can fix. Now, there are certain agreement with the funding of the airport. There's some speculation. The new government may make some changes. Is there any possibility exists that any changes can make, meaning finance, maybe going to other organization, money agencies for the funding of the airport? Is there any possibility that can happen?
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for that question. You rightfully say you're talking about speculation, and normally I don't give really answers on speculation, but I understand where you're coming from, so I will still try to answer your question. What this government did is to provide, because of the solvability of being a country, you're able to attract, good financing. And the only thing we did is to assist the airports with a finance facility based on their request. I think it's one of the best financial deals that you will find in the open market. And yes, of course, any government that will come after us can have a different opinion. However, if we clearly look at, or carefully look at the instructions from the government, or the governor, or the formation of a interim government, it is clear that the governor is also concerned of a possible, going a different direction or change in. He requested the change in the course. He requested the formateur to adhere to the process of the rehabilitation and financing of the airport. That is my take on the instruction from the governor. So yes, of course, it's possible. So yeah. I mean, we did as a government what we could do, bring in the best possible deal with the least risk to the country and the people and the airport, and keep the airport safe and sound. Even under reconstruction, we have put in securities, liquidity securities, try to find it on the open market, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Heerlings. Dimitri, you have the floor.
Hi, my second question is a follow-up to the Prime Minister. You just said a few moments ago that there's some confusion in the community regarding elections. And my question is, why didn't the Council of Ministers check into the legal timeframes for elections before setting the first date for elections to avoid all this chaos in the first place?
Thank you for that question, Dimitri. As I stated in my facts, the Council of Ministers did do our due diligence. We did consult with the Electoral Council. We did consult with the main voting bureau. We had other dates. Those dates were changed after consultation. Those were not the council's original dates, and I would leave that as that, but you decipher for yourself. We would not be in this confusion if we had stuck to the discussions that we had with the Electoral Council and the main voting bureau, but we did do our due diligence, and I stand by that.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I would like to, for the media, welcome the presence of the Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport, and Telecommunication, the Honorable Stuart Johnson, who is here simply for questions. We now move on to Wendell Moore. You have the floor.
My question is to the Prime Minister, who I believe is also responsible for VSR. What can you tell us in the eventual departing of this Council of Ministers, that was on your table in regards to VSR, especially with the hospital project, that we, as media, can be consistent with, because we know that there has also been an issue with continuity. So if you can brief us on where we are with that,
Yes.
then we would be in a position to follow up, I guess,
Yes.
on these things in the best interest of St. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I can tell you that the hospital project, all questions as it relates to the hospital will have to be posed to the hospital because it's a hospital project. So their board and their representatives can give that information. Government at the time was just a facilitator between the World Bank, ensuring that they got the funding. That was done. Government has no further role with such. So any questions about the hospital, I invite you to please direct your questions to the hospital. As it relates to other issues in VSA that are pending, the GHI, so the General Health Insurance legislation will be coming to the Council of Ministers to be moved forward to Parliament to have the debate on such, so that has been finalized. And I know that should be in the Council of Ministers meeting for next Tuesday. I believe those were the two pending stuff, and I believe there's something coming from SADV when it comes to, I'm trying to think about it at the top of my head. Our that's another issue that is being finalized as we speak. So those are the things that you can look forward to. At least the next incoming Minister of VSI will have to handle it, depending on how soon the interim government finalizes their screening process.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We now move on to the third round of questions. Lyndon, you have the floor.
Question to the Minister of Tourism. Glad to see you back. Minister, there is, well, in the newspaper today, there's an international company that manages harbor and port. Did you have any consultation with them that they are interested in managing St. Martin Harbor, a port? Did you had any former or presently having any discussion with this company?
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for the question. And indeed, Global Ports did make a presentation to the Council of Ministers, by extension to the coalition members that supported or support those who are remaining, this current government as well. And by extension, of course, has had several discussions, what I've made to understand through media announcements with different stakeholders. If we look at the direction in which the port needs to go, if we look at the vision forward for St. Martin, and the need to ensure that there's enough capital investment necessary for St. Martin to stay ahead of the curve in terms of cruise arrivals, in terms of cruise passenger experience, in terms of the overall financing of the port, there is those discussions that as a government you have to have, not only with Global Ports, with many others. We've had many other third parties that have shown interest. In lieu of that, what has happened is that the port management and through port management, they are busy developing an RFP, which is a request for proposal in terms of for financing. So that RFP, of course, is basically in its final stages to be drafted. That will allow for any consortium or any number of cruise lines coming together, any third party, anyone in particular. So it basically opens up the opportunity for raising the necessary capital financing the harbor might need for its future development. You have a scenario where, Mr. Brown, if, for instance, God forbid, in the unlikely event that hopefully another hurricane does not affect our island with such catastrophic damages, that it could put our port in such a vulnerable situation. I know, for instance, the Pier 1 requires more extensive works to be done to it to the tune of 10 to 15 million US dollars to ensure that it's properly reinforced. Of course, if you have damage to Pier 1, for instance, in the event of a major hurricane, that would also limit the number of cruise berths that we can have on St. Martin. It would also hinder another major critical asset for St. Martin and our second main port of entry. So it puts then in a scenario, even in this hurricane season, where the island in particular be in a very precarious situation and would be very vulnerable, even in the long term. So indeed, to have those discussions, it's important. I've heard along the campaign trail that some are already throwing out the name, that they're willing to have discussions with global ports and all of that. But it sounds nice. And as still a caretaker administration, it has been the responsibility of this government to seek to have dialogue with many other stakeholders. FCC in particular, in June of last year, I traveled where I had that discussion with them, where they were aware of the situation. So indeed, when fake news reports all sorts of things, within SURE, that also will be clarified. So indeed, thank you for your question. And like many other stakeholders, we have had discussions with global ports.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. Dimitri, you have the floor.
Yes, my question is to the Minister of Tourism. In that same newspaper article that ran this morning, I think he was the head of business development for Global Ports, said that he estimated the debt of the port to be between 180 and 200 million. Can you give me the exact figure of what the debt is at Port St. Martin and who it is owed to?
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. I will request that information and have the port reach out to you, of course, in that regard. That I think is the right channel to do, but it is estimated around those figures indeed, and that's why the need to raise the necessary capital, consider financing of the port in terms of the cruise and cargo facilities was financed are mostly interlocked. They go hand in hand with each other. So any issue in terms of refinancing or looking for the necessary financing for the port is in connection with that. I just also want to be clear, because I also know that there is a lot of fake news out there in regards to commitments. There is no signed agreements. Same like many other instances, there's nothing that says, well, the government of St. Martin is going to work with global ports, and that's the reason for the RFP. That's open, it's transparent, and it allows for a full opportunity for many others if they see the need to also be a part of that process. So I will provide that information and request it through the port for you.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. Wendell Moore, you have the floor.
Question to the Minister of Finance. Mr. Killings, I think recently it was mentioned that you had either made a payment, please clear it up, and made a payment to one of those entities that you were indebted to. Can't be sure if it's Telem or one of those. In any case, you have committed yourself to take care of those payments, and you apparently have started. What can you tell us about the coffers of the country when it comes to what kind of financial resource that we have available, taking into account that pretty soon, there might be a change?
Thank you for reminding me of that fact, Mr. Moore. Just to rewind, in 2015, the country of St. Martin got a instruction on their financing. One of the recommendations, one of the instructions was start working on your debts, your payments in arrear. And for years now, it has been, lingering. And when I came in, that was one of my priorities, because if you want to clean up the financial detriment of the country, you need to start. So you can have a better picture multi-annually what you can expect also through your budget and on the income and remaining debts. So we started on that journey, and in total we had 4 major institutions that we owed money: TLM, SZV, APS, GBE, even the harbor. Only GBE and the harbor, we were able to kind of mitigate debts into a more technical accounting-wise solution. Because of their own financial problems, the government reached an agreement which gave them some leeway to start their new book year. With TLM, the government in the past years just didn't pay their bills. That by itself is already a very strange thing to me. You should pay your bills. So, and you can understand with the competition now coming with a bigger company as the owner of UTS. TALEM needed to be more solvable or have a better idea where they stand financially. So that was a priority to make those arrangements. We negotiated and we came to a solution. We even worked out a payment schedule. And that payment schedule, of course, will require some discipline from the government. And hopefully, whoever comes after me, that they will, do what they need to do, because it's really important also for TALEM. On the other hand, it cleans up our debts and it brings us in a better position. With SZV, also a very long, ongoing issue. I mean, we're talking amounts of above 90 million guilders, which is really ludicrous, that 9 years after becoming autonomous, we are talking about those type of things. So we at least agreed that we are going to settle it. There are some ideas how to do it also immediately. Those are talks that I also have with other stakeholders to mitigate that. Right now, we are still looking at what is the exact amount. We came to a certain amount, but there are some other small issues that need to be clarified, and hopefully by the end of this month, we thought by the end of November, that amount should be fixed so we can work out the repayment deal. So, yes, unfortunate that I might not be able to start all of that in my term, but I'm sure that a colleague that follows me, will do the honorable thing and honor the agreements that this government made. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Heerlings. We now move on to the final round of questions. Lyndon, you have the floor.
Question to the Prime Minister. Glad to see you back, Minister. There are the feelings, are the sentiments of the people of St. Martin that they do not interested in election. Why now? The main voting bureau are in a reconstruction. I mean, why now? Why now? Do they not had enough time before, thinking that election might come shortly?
Lyndon, you asked a great question. The main voting bureau, indeed, I must state that, as I indicated, that there are clear, the Constitution and the kiesverordening, so the electoral laws are not in line with each other. Does the main voting bureau know this? Yes. Does the electoral council know this? Yes. So what we did a couple of months ago is we, as government, I formed the electoral committee. The idea of the electoral committee was for the electoral council, the main voting bureau, the civil registry department, I believe those were the three main ones, to come and sit together and look at the laws that need to be changed in the kiesverordening, in the electoral laws. That process started, but unfortunately we ended up here. Parliament also had an electoral committee in place, and the idea that was, at least from the government's part, that we would have liaisons with them and show them these are the areas that we came up with per stakeholder, so whether it's government, electoral council, main voting bureau, government as this burgerzaken, so civil registry department, and from then work together in making those changes so that we would never encounter again another impasse. So we would be able to address those issues. Unfortunately, that has not been finalized, but yes, indeed, this is something that had to happen way before. So I hope that whoever is coming in after my person, that they will continue with the electoral committee to make sure that all of the laws that need to be aligned with the Constitution, that is addressed immediately so that we do not experience again a fallout, whether it's with the main voting bureau, who rightfully stated that they'd have insufficient time because we don't know anything in our Constitution and even in electoral laws about snap elections. That is not stipulated in any law, but yet we do have it. So it also needs to be addressed. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Dimitri, you have the floor.
Hi, Madam Prime Minister. I would have asked this too to the Justice Minister if you were here. But last week, both of you, and I'm asking this question specifically to you, were given a vote of no confidence and asked to leave with immediate effect. Do you plan to demit your office given this vote of no confidence? If so, when? If not, why?
Thank you for that question. I can say I can't fire myself twice. On Monday, September 23rd, I resigned. The whole Council of Ministers resigned. We got the instructions from the governor to stay, to be a caretaker until a new government is placed. So if the governor asked, we complied. So I don't see it quite relevant to entertain anything else. If the governor asks me to leave, then I have absolutely no problem in leaving. I look forward for when, as a matter of fact, my office is already, I already started clearing out my stuff. I don't have a problem, but the governor asked for us to stay on as a caretaker, and the responsible thing to do is to accept it and continue and finalize the things that need to be finalized. So that based on the governor's request is why I chose to still stay here along with the rest of the Council of Ministers.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Wendell Moore, you have the final question.
Let me direct this back to the Minister of Finance. And just a question. I expect you to tell me that you are not responsible for what anyone else did, but I believe there was some arrangement in place for SZV in an attempt to settle the amount that the government had for SZV, that they would own the government building and have it furnished for occupation. And then the government would be paying rent, as it were, to SZV for this building. I just wanted to know if that system is in place, because if it is, then I don't understand how there can be that huge amount of outstanding with SZV as far as the government is concerned. But can you tell us anything about that plan, if you know anything of it? Or?
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Yes, indeed. I mean, that was indeed an agreement the government made then with SZV to settle part of the debt. So you can imagine. And while we are conducting our day-to-day business, the debt is still accumulating. And that has to do with certain, how you call it, one of those facilities that SZV has, the OZR, that is accumulating continuously on a monthly basis. And so those debts are being, getting more and more and more. However, the government, besides paying the rent, we also pay up a monthly amount to kind of mitigate the ongoing accumulation of the debts. That doesn't mean that that initial agreement, transfer of the building and the monthly rent is sufficient. It's the same thing out there with your mortgage. I mean, you have the mortgage loan every month you pay, but that doesn't mean you settle the whole thing one time. It's going to take some time. But besides that, there are other debts as well, and those are the ones that you are trying to settle. So, yeah, it might sound a little confusing the way you put it, but this is how it is. The debts were humongous,
Thank you, Minister
I hope it
Heerlings.
answers your question.
Thank you, Minister Heerlings. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, October 2nd, 2019. For rebroadcast, tune in at 7 p.m. on St. Martin Cable TV and via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM. For video on demand, log on to the official government's website at stmartingov.org. On behalf of the Department of Communication, I'm Rolika Roach and wishing you a pleasant day further.